28 years old and work as a freelance photographer. I needed new material for my portfolio, and my deadline was creeping up fast. I decided on the southern Appalachian Mountains because they had this reputation for raw, untouched beauty. The kind of place where light filters through trees in ways that make your heart stop. I woke up at 4 in the morning, loaded my camera gear and camping equipment into my old pickup truck, and started driving. It took me 6 hours, passing through small towns with diners and weathered churches. I pulled into the trailhead parking area at 10:30. The gravel lot was completely empty. Just me, some rocks, and a wooden sign so weathered I could barely read the trail name. I felt excited more than anything. Perfect lighting for afternoon shots. The trail started with a gentle incline over rocky terrain. Oak and hickory trees rose up on both sides, their fallen leaves creating this carpet of browns and reds beneath my boots. I stopped every few hundred feet to frame shots of moss-covered boulders and the way sunlight cut through the canopy. The first 2 hours passed quickly as the sun climbed higher. Then I heard it, the faint sound of running water somewhere ahead. I followed the sound, leaving the main trail just a bit, pushing through thick laurel bushes that grabbed at my pack. That's when I found it. A small waterfall, maybe 15 feet tall, spilling into a clear pool. There was a flat area nearby with a ring of stones from previous campers. Perfect spot. I set up my tent quickly, organized my gear, then spent the next 2 hours shooting the waterfall from different angles as the light changed. By the time the sun started setting, I was exhausted. I ate protein bars and trail mix, didn't bother with a fire because I wanted to sleep early. I crawled into my sleeping bag at 9, listening to the waterfall. That's when I noticed something odd. Outside the water sound, there was nothing. No crickets, no night birds, just silence. I shrugged it off. Probably too cold for insects. I woke at sunrise, 6:15, with mist hanging over the waterfall like something out of a dream. I made instant coffee on my camp stove and planned my route deeper into the woods. I packed a day bag with my camera, 2 lenses, water, and snacks, then headed uphill. The terrain got steeper and more rugged. After 45 minutes, I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against a large oak tree. That's when I noticed something on the bark. Handprints. But they were wrong. The prints were pressed into the bark like someone had grabbed the tree hard. The fingers were too long, spread too wide. I examined them closer. The bark was actually indented, not scratched. That would take serious force. I felt unsettled but tried to rationalize it. Maybe a bear. Maybe some kind of prank. I kept hiking, more alert now, camera ready. 20 minutes later, the trail narrowed and I had to duck under low branches. That's when I spotted clothing snagged on a branch right at eye level. A torn flannel shirt, faded and weathered like it had been there for months. The fabric was shredded in straight lines, not torn by thorns. I looked around for more items but found nothing. I figured some hiker lost it, got it caught, ripped free, and kept going. But the shirt was 8 feet up. You would need to climb to snag it there. An uncomfortable feeling crawled up my spine. Maybe I should get a few more shots, then head back to camp. But I pushed forward another 30 minutes. Curiosity outweighed caution. I entered an area with dense underbrush where visibility dropped. I nearly tripped over a backpack half buried in leaves. It was old, covered in mildew, the zipper broken. I opened it and found a wallet inside. The ID card read Daniel Pritchett, issued 8 years ago. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. I looked around more carefully and found more items scattered in a 20-foot radius. 1 hiking boot. A cracked water bottle. A pair of glasses with 1 lens missing. All of them weathered and old, like they had been abandoned for a long time. I tried to reason through it. Maybe this person got lost, dropped stuff while running out. But why leave a wallet? Why scatter items so far apart? The feeling of being watched settled heavy on my shoulders. I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but the silence was thick and absolute. No wind. Leaves didn't rustle. No birds, no squirrels. This was enough. I needed to head back now. I turned around and started retracing my steps, walking faster. I kept looking over my shoulder, nothing there. Then I heard it, a faint crack of a branch behind me. I froze and listened for 30 seconds. Nothing followed. I resumed walking, pace quickening. Then I realized the landmarks didn't look familiar. Did I veer off the path? Mild panic set in. I checked my phone for GPS. No signal. I took a breath and told myself to calm down. I retraced more carefully and found the trampled ferns from earlier. Relief washed over me. I was back on track. 20 minutes into my return hike, moving at a steady pace, I heard a distinct snap of a thick branch breaking. Not a small twig. A thick branch. I froze completely and listened. The sound came from my left, maybe 40 feet away. I stood still for a full minute. Nothing. I started walking again, slower now, ears straining. Another snap, this time from my right side, closer, 30 feet. Whatever it was packing me, staying parallel. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My hands gripped the camera strap tight. I told myself not to run, to stay calm, to keep a steady pace. Then I heard a low sound. Not a growl, not quite breathing, something between the two, like air being pulled through wet cloth, raspy and deliberate. It came every 10 seconds, rhythmic, and it was getting closer. The sound was now only 20 feet away. I scanned the trees and underbrush. Nothing visible, then a short, high-pitched sound, almost like a bird call but the wrong pitch. It ended abruptly, followed by rustling of leaves, something moving through the underbrush. Not walking, dragging, and it was moving faster than a walking pace. My breath came shorter, my hands shook. The raspy breathing came again, but now on both sides, stereo. More than one, or had it circled around. I couldn't keep walking slow. I needed to move faster. I sped up to almost a jog. The sound sped up too, keeping pace. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. A dark shape low to the ground. I kept my eyes forward and focused on getting to camp. Maybe 15 minutes at this pace. Then I heard scratching on a tree trunk to my left, like claws on bark. Deliberate and slow. That was it. Time to run. I broke into a full sprint. My pack bounced on my back as I dodged trees and jumped over logs. Branches slapped my face. Behind me, immediate response. Something crashed through the underbrush fast. Whatever was chasing me was faster than any human. Gaining ground. My lungs burned and my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I glanced back over my shoulder. A dark shape moved between the trees, too low, on all fours. I couldn't make out details, just mass and speed. I turned my eyes back to the path and nearly tripped on a root. I recognized a rock formation. Camp was close. 5 minutes maybe. The chasing sound split. One continued behind me, one veered right. They were trying to flank me, cut off my escape. I found energy I didn't know I had and sprinted faster. To my right, something burst through the bushes parallel to me, keeping pace. I saw it briefly. Low profile, moving on 4 limbs, pale skin. Too fast for details. I could see the orange of my tent through the trees. 100 yards. I ran all out, not caring about noise or trail. I burst into the clearing. The waterfall was still running. I didn't stop. I grabbed the tent poles and yanked the tent down without unzipping it. I shoved the tent and sleeping bag into my pack, not neat, just fast. I slung my camera bag over my other shoulder. At the edge of the clearing in the tree line, I heard that breathing sound. Watching. I didn't look. I didn't make eye contact. I just started downhill on the main trail, fast walk, not quite running. Behind me, I heard movement in my campsite. Something was going through my abandoned items. I kept moving, focused on getting down the mountain before dark. 45 minutes downhill, the sun was setting and shadows stretched long across the trail. I maintained a fast walk, but my legs were weak and I kept tripping. Light was fading fast. I pulled out my small flashlight. I could hear movement in the woods alongside me, keeping pace. They weren't hiding anymore. I could hear multiple things, 3 or 4 moving through the trees parallel to the trail. Occasionally, one would cross the trail behind me, cutting off retreat. They were herding me, pushing me forward. Maybe trying to tire me out, waiting for me to collapse. I needed to get off this mountain, reach a road, any road. The trail hit a steep section with loose rocks. I had to slow down or risk falling. That's when they closed in. Shapes emerged from the trees on both sides, 30 feet away. I froze on the trail, my flashlight beam shook in my hand. There were 4 of them, low to the ground, standing still. It was hard to see clearly in the failing light. They had pale skin, almost gray. No fur. Their bodies were humanoid, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, legs bent backward at the knee. Their heads tilted at odd angles and large eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's. maybe 4 feet tall at the shoulder, went on all fours. One made that raspy breathing sound. The others answered. Nobody moved for 10 seconds. Then the one on the left took a step forward. The others followed. I swung my flashlight toward them. They stopped. I moved the light away. They advanced. They didn't like direct light. I kept the flashlight pointed at them and backed down the trail slowly. They paced forward as I backed, maintaining distance. One broke from the group and tried to circle behind me. I spun the flashlight to it. It retreated to the group. I kept the flashlight moving, covering all four, backing down the trail, careful with my footing. This continued for 5 agonizing minutes. Then the trail curved into a steeper drop. I couldn't watch my footing and watch them at the same time. I had to turn and move faster. I spun and started a fast descent. I heard the immediate response. All four rushed forward with the sound of scrambling on rocks. I ran in a controlled fall down the steep section, using trees to slow myself. They were getting closer. I could hear their breathing, grunting sounds. Ahead, the trail leveled out. I could see a break in the trees. I pushed into a final sprint. My legs felt like rubber. My flashlight beam caught eyes right behind me. 10 feet. Closing. 50 feet to the opening. I burst out onto a gravel road and stumbled, falling to my knees. Behind me, the crashing stopped at the tree line. They didn't follow onto the road. I looked back. 4 pairs of eyes glowed in my flashlight beam just inside the tree line. They were standing still now, not advancing, just staring. They stayed there for 30 seconds, then slowly backed into the darkness. Gone. Disappeared into the forest. Silence returned. I sat on the gravel for 2 minutes, catching my breath, shaking. I checked the tree line multiple times. Nothing. I forced my legs to work and started walking down the road. It was almost full dark now and my flashlight battery was getting low. I walked for 20 minutes down a winding mountain road. No cars. Then I saw lights ahead, the glow of a gas station. Civilization. Relief overwhelmed me. I almost cried. I reached the small place. 2 pumps and attached convenience store. Inside, a bell rang. An old man behind the counter looked up. I must have looked terrible, covered in dirt, scratches on my face, wild-eyed. He said, "You all right, son? Look like you seen a ghost." I replied, "Yeah, I'm fine, just need to get to my truck." I explained I parked at the trailhead 6 miles up and asked if he could call someone. The old man studied my face and nodded slowly. "What trailhead?" I told him the name. His expression changed, concerned. "You went up there alone?" At this time of year, I was confused. "Yeah, why?" He leaned on the counter. "You run into anything up there, anything strange?" I hesitated, not sure what to say. "Like what?" he said. "Things that don't walk right, things that watch." I stared at him. "You know about them?" He nodded. "Crawlers, that's what folks around here call them. Been in those mountains long as anyone remembers." I asked, "What are they?" He shrugged. "Don't rightly know. Some say they used to be people, got lost too long up there. Others say they were always here. Either way, they don't come down below the tree line." That was exactly what I had noticed. He continued, "You're lucky you made it out before full dark. They get bolder at night. Stick to marked trails, don't camp alone, and if you hear that breathing sound, you leave." I thanked him, my voice shaking. He offered to drive me to the trailhead to get my truck. I accepted, grateful. The drive was quiet, 15 minutes. He didn't ask more questions. The parking lot was still empty. My pickup sat alone under a single light. The old man said, "You be safe now and don't go back up there." I promised, "I won't." I started my truck and pulled onto the highway, watching the mountains recede in my rearview mirror. Hours later, I finally got home at 2 in the morning. I locked every door and checked every window. Then I remembered I had taken photos. I checked my memory card and scrolled through. Landscape shots, the waterfall. Then one photo from when I was running. An accidental shot. The camera must have fired. The image was blurry but clear enough. A pale figure on all fours with large eyes and an open mouth. I stared at it for a long time, then I deleted it. I deleted all the photos from that day. I'm never going back. Never telling anyone the details, but I can't forget those eyes or that breathing sound. It's been 3 months now and I still have nightmares. I wonder how many people went up that mountain and didn't come back. Daniel Pritchett. His wallet is still up there. Maybe he's still up there too. Some places aren't meant for us. Those mountains remember everyone who enters, and they don't always let you leave. I was 24 when I decided to go up to our family hunting spot alone for the first time. My grandfather built this cabin back in the 1960s, deep in the mountains of western Virginia. My dad used to take me there every fall since I was a kid, but this November, he had to work. The cabin sits almost 4 miles off the nearest paved road. You have to hike through rough terrain, up and down ridges covered in oak and pine. No electricity, no phone service, just a wood stove and an oil lantern. I packed my rifle, a backpack with supplies for 2 nights, and an old topographic map my grandfather had marked up years ago. I reached the cabin around noon and dropped my gear inside. The place smelled like old wood and damp earth, but it felt good to be back. By 3 in the afternoon, I decided to scout the area near the small pond about half a mile downhill. I wanted to find a good spot for the next morning. The trees were bare, and the wind cut through my jacket as I followed the old trail down. That is when I smelled it. Blood and rot, thick in the cold air. I found the deer carcass about 20 feet off the trail, lying next to a large boulder. It was a doe torn open from the belly. Her insides were pulled out and scattered across the ground, but what made my stomach turn was how the rib cage looked. The bones were snapped and bent outward in a way that did not make sense. I have seen plenty of kills from bears and coyotes. This was different. There were no claw marks on the bones, no bite patterns I recognized. Blood had sprayed up onto a nearby tree, reaching about 6 feet high. I crouched down and noticed some gray fibers stuck to a low branch. Not bear fur, not coyote, something else. The carcass was still soft, maybe 12 to 24 hours old. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to make sense of it. A few crows burst from the trees in the distance, their calls echoing through the hollow. I marked the location in my mind and kept moving toward the pond, but the whole time I could not shake the feeling that I was not alone out there. By 4 in the afternoon, clouds had rolled in and the woods grew darker. I decided to head back early instead of continuing my scout. I took a different trail that looped east to avoid passing the carcass again. About 5 minutes in, I noticed something on the trees. 3 or 4 of them had deep claw marks running down the bark. The gouges started about 7 or 8 feet up and dragged straight down. 4 parallel lines, wider than any bear claw I had ever seen. The wood inside was fresh, still damp with sap. Some of the cuts went 2 inches deep. While I stood there examining the marks, I heard a branch snap behind me. I spun around fast but saw nothing except a bush still shaking slightly. The hair on my neck stood up. I stopped moving and listened, just wind and distant birds, but the feeling was strong. Something was watching me. I started walking again, faster this time, trying not to run. Every few minutes I glanced back over my shoulder. That is when I started hearing it. A rustling in the dry leaves, rhythmic and steady, staying about 50 or 60 feet behind me. I tested it, stopped walking suddenly. The sound stopped a couple seconds later, started walking again. The sound returned. I did this twice more. Same result. My heart hammered against my ribs. I gave up trying to be quiet and moved quickly up the last slope toward the cabin. One final look back before I reached the clearing, I saw it. A dark shape moving fast between the tree trunks, too far and too dark to make out clearly. I climbed the final ridge and practically ran the last 100 feet to the cabin. By the time I got inside, I was breathing hard and sweating despite the cold. The cabin measured about 15 by 20 feet. One main door in front, a window on each side, and a back door leading to the woodpile area. I locked the front door immediately and checked the back. It had a simple wooden latch. The windows had no glass, just wooden shutters that closed from inside with metal hooks. I lit the oil lantern, and the small flame cast a weak yellow glow across the single room. Then I got a fire going in the wood stove using old newspaper and dry kindling. The warmth helped, made me feel safer. I heated up a can of soup on top of the stove using a small aluminum pot and ate with some bread from my pack. Sitting alone in the quiet, I could only hear the fire crackling. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. The deer was killed by a bear. The claw marks were from a bear. The sounds in the woods were just a deer or maybe another bear passing through. But deep down, I knew something was off. My grandfather used to tell stories about things in these mountains that people should not mess with. Back then, I thought he was just trying to scare me. I pulled out my rifle and checked the magazine. 5 rounds. I set it against the wall next to where I would sleep. My hunting knife came out of its sheath and went beside my sleeping bag. I tested my flashlight. Battery was full. It was only 7 at night, but outside was pitch black. Wind picked up and I could hear branches scraping against the tin roof. I decided to lie down early, staying fully dressed inside my sleeping bag on the thin foam mat. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the fire and the wind, trying to fall asleep. I do not know how long I slept before I woke up. The fire had burned down to just a few glowing embers. The lantern still flickered, but the flame was tiny now. The cabin felt cold and dark. At first, I just heard the wind. Then I heard something else. A scraping sound against the wooden wall on my left side. Slow and deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like claws or wood dragging on wood. I froze in my sleeping bag, holding my breath. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. The scraping moved along the wall from left to right, steady, purposeful, like something was testing it. When it reached the corner, it stopped for a few seconds. Then the sound shifted to the front wall where the door was. 3 soft knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. They sounded almost like knuckles, but heavier. A pause. Then 4 more knocks. Knock, 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 knock. No voice, no footsteps, just knocking. I slowly reached for my rifle, trying not to make any noise, but my sleeping bag rustled anyway. I gripped the cold metal and pointed it toward the door, lying perfectly still. Then I heard movement under the cabin. The structure sat on stone pillars about 2 feet off the ground. Something was crawling underneath. Scratching, dragging, moving from the front toward the back. The floorboards vibrated under my back. That is when I heard breathing. Right outside the window on my right side. Deep, slow, uneven breaths. It sounded human but wrong, like something was stuck in its throat. The sound was close. Maybe just inches from the wooden shutter. I sat up carefully, still holding the rifle. I crawled to the left window, the one away from the breathing. Slowly, I cracked open a tiny gap in the shutter. Moonlight filtered through clouds, but I could not see anything clear. Just shadows and the dark shapes of trees. Suddenly everything went silent. No scraping, no knocking, no breathing. The silence felt worse than the sounds. I waited, listening hard. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Nothing. I stayed sitting against the wall, rifle across my lap. I decided I would not lie down again. I would wait like this until morning. I sat there for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. Everything stayed quiet. I started wondering if I had imagined it all, but my hands were still shaking and the rifle felt heavy in my grip. Then I heard something on the roof. Footsteps. Not like a raccoon or a possum. These had weight. Step, step, step. Moving from the back of the cabin toward the front, then stopping right above my head. A scraping sound started on the tin roof. Metal on metal, screech, screech. I looked up at the ceiling and saw dust falling from cracks between the boards. I could not take it anymore. I had to know what it was. I grabbed my flashlight and crawled to the front door. My hand touched the latch and I prepared myself. I pulled the bolt slowly, trying not to make noise, and opened the door about 3 inches. I pointed the flashlight beam outside. The light swept across the front clearing. Nothing. I moved it left, normal. When I swept it right, my body locked up completely. It was standing about 15 feet away next to the big oak tree, tall over 7 feet for sure. Its body was thin, arms and legs too long. It stood hunched forward with high shoulders. The skin or fur was a dark grayish color, hard to tell in the flashlight beam, but the head was wrong, oval-shaped and elongated with a jaw that stuck out. And the eyes. The eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's eyes do at night. But they were not yellow or green like a bear or a deer. They glowed orange-red like hot coals. They stared directly at me without blinking. The thing stood completely still when the light hit it. After a few seconds, it slowly tilted its head to the left. The angle was not natural, almost 90 degrees. Its mouth opened slightly, but I could not see teeth clearly. No growl, no sound at all. I could not move. My body would not respond. I wanted to slam the door shut, but I was paralyzed. I just stood there holding the flashlight, staring into those burning eyes. Then, after what felt like forever but was probably 10 seconds, it moved, not walking normally. It shifted to the left in this strange gliding motion, disappearing from view. But I could still hear something moving around the cabin. I snapped out of it and slammed the door, throwing the latch closed. I stumbled backward, gasping for air, legs trembling. I knew right then. I had to leave. I could not stay in this cabin until morning. I did not have much time to think. The front was obviously not an option. Whatever that thing was, it was out there. I decided to go through the back door and run downhill toward the main road. It was almost 4 miles through rough terrain in the dark, but staying here was not a choice anymore. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed in a spare flashlight, my knife, and a little food. I pulled on my heavy jacket and kept the rifle in my hands. I moved to the back door and stood there listening. Silence. I slowly pulled the latch and eased the door open. Outside was pure darkness. I could barely make out the woodpile stacked against the cabin wall. I waited 30 seconds, scanning what I could see. Nothing moved. I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me. Staying close to the cabin wall, I moved toward the trail that led downhill. I tried to walk quietly, but dry leaves crunched under my boots. When I got about 30 feet from the cabin, I heard a loud crash from the front. A branch snapping. Something was moving fast. I stopped trying to be quiet. I turned on my flashlight and started running. I ran downhill, following the direction of the old trail. Behind me, I heard it. Something was chasing me. Not footsteps exactly, but the sound of branches breaking, leaves thrashing, something big moving through the woods at speed. I ran faster than I ever had, jumping over roots and rocks. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, showing glimpses of trees and ground. My lungs burned. The sound behind me stayed close, maybe 50 feet back. I could hear multiple crashes now, like it was not just behind me but also to my sides. The thing was fast, too fast. I veered right off the trail, crashing through thick brush. Branches whipped my face and tore at my jacket. I lost my sense of direction but kept running downhill. That is when I heard it, a stream. I could hear running water ahead. I burst through a final wall of bushes and splashed into cold water up to my knees. The shock almost knocked me down, but I kept moving. I followed the stream downstream, my boots soaking through, legs going numb from the cold. The crashing sounds faded slightly. I did not stop. I kept wading through that freezing water for what felt like forever but was probably 15 or 20 minutes. Finally, I saw it through the trees, the reflective paint on a guardrail catching my flashlight, the road. I climbed up the muddy bank, using roots and rocks to pull myself up. When I got onto the pavement, my legs nearly gave out. I collapsed onto the shoulder, gasping, shaking all over. I do not know how long I sat there, maybe an hour. Eventually, I saw headlights coming down the road. I stood up and waved both arms. An old pickup truck slowed down and stopped. The driver was an older man with a gray beard. He rolled down his window. "You all right, son?" he asked, looking at my muddy clothes and wet boots. "I need a ride," I managed to say. "Please." He did not ask many questions, just told me to get in the back seat. I climbed in, still clutching my rifle. He kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror while he drove, but he stayed quiet. He dropped me off at a gas station about 30 miles away. I called my dad from a payphone. I did not go back for my gear. 2 days later, I got a call from a forest ranger named Davidson. He said they had been doing a routine patrol in that area and found something strange. My food bag was still hanging in the tree where I had left it, but when they went to check the cabin, it was not there. I thought he meant it had burned down. "No," he said over the phone. "I mean there was nothing there at all. No foundation stones, no debris, no sign a structure ever existed in that clearing." I told him that was impossible. My grandfather built that cabin in the 60s. My family had been using it for decades. He said he had the coordinates I gave him and went to the exact spot. There was just an empty clearing with old-growth trees around it. "Are you sure you had the right location?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I checked 3 times," he said. "Found your food bag hanging from a tree branch right there, but no cabin, nothing." We talked for a few more minutes, but neither of us had answers. He suggested maybe I had gotten disoriented in the dark. I did not argue. I thanked him and hung up. My dad wanted to drive up there and see for himself, but I convinced him not to. I told him the whole area felt wrong and we should just stay away. That was 8 years ago. I have not been back to those mountains since. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about those orange-red eyes staring at me through the darkness. My dad sold the property rights to that land the following year without ever visiting it again. He never asked me exactly what happened that night, and I never told him the full story. Whatever is out there in those deep Appalachian woods, it is still there. And some places are not meant for people like us. I learned that the hard way. Now I stick to hunting land that has cell phone service and other people around. Call me paranoid if you want. But I know what I saw. And I know I got out only because I ran when I did. I do not think about what would have happened if I had stayed in that cabin until morning. Some questions are better left unanswered. I work as a graphic designer, fully remote, which sounds perfect until you realize how hard it is to focus when your roommate is blasting music at 2 in the afternoon, and your internet drops every 20 minutes. I had a major project due in 5 days, a complete rebrand for a client who was already breathing down my neck, and I knew I needed to get out. I found this little place on Airbnb, tucked away in the mountains of West Virginia, cheap and isolated. Perfect. I packed my laptop, some clothes, and left Friday afternoon. The drive took 3 hours, and the last 40 minutes were on this narrow dirt road that made my old pickup rattle like it was falling apart. When I finally saw the cabin through the trees, small and wooden and quiet, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. The owner had left the key under a clay pot on the porch, just like she said she would. Inside, the place was basic but clean. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a wood stove. No television, no distractions. I unpacked, set up my laptop on the table by the front window, and got to work. The silence was incredible. I could hear every keystroke, every breath. By 11 that night, I had made solid progress. I ate a sandwich, checked the locks on the front door and the back door twice, and went to bed feeling good about my decision. Saturday morning, I woke up around 7. Something felt off, but I could not pin it down. I went downstairs, started a pot of coffee, and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. Trees everywhere, not a soul in sight. I figured I would step outside, get some fresh air before diving back into work. I walked to the back door and reached for the handle. It turned easily, too easily. The door was unlocked. I stood there, staring at the handle, trying to remember the night before. I had locked it. I was sure of it. I remembered testing it, pulling on it to make sure the bolt was in place. Maybe the latch was old, I thought. Maybe it did not catch right. I stepped outside, walked around the cabin, checking for anything strange. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. I went back inside, locked the door again, and pulled hard to test it. It held. I told myself I was being paranoid. The place was old, things did not always work perfectly. I poured my coffee and sat down at my laptop, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my stomach. That night I worked late. Around 11, I was deep in a design mock-up when I heard it. A soft sound like someone tapping on glass. Talk, talk, talk. I stopped typing, listened. Talk, talk, talk. It was coming from the living room window right behind me. I turned slowly. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the glass shaking slightly with each tap. I thought maybe it was a branch, but there was no wind. The night was completely still. I stood up, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked over to the window. My hand shook as I pulled back the curtain. I pressed my face close to the glass and shined the light outside. Trees, shadows, nothing else. The tapping stopped. I stood there for 2 full minutes, scanning the yard, waiting for something to move. Nothing. I decided to check outside. I unlocked the front door, flipped on the porch light. It was a weak yellow bulb that barely lit the first few feet. I stepped out onto the creaky boards and looked around. Empty. But I had this feeling, this crawling sensation on the back of my neck, like something was watching me from just beyond the light. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled all the curtains shut. I tried to keep working, but my focus was gone. At 1 in the morning, I gave up and went to bed, checking every lock twice before I climbed under the covers. I woke up at 2:30. No alarm, no sound, just suddenly awake. I lay there listening. Then I heard it, footsteps, heavy, slow, walking around the outside of the cabin. Not the L-I-G-H-T Chinese letter of a deer or a raccoon. These were deliberate. I sat up, barely breathing. The steps moved from the front of the cabin to the left side, slow and uneven, like whoever it was had trouble walking. I slid out of bed, staying low, and crawled to the window. The curtain was already drawn, but I cracked it open just enough to see out. The moon was full and bright, lighting up the yard in this cold silver glow. And there at the edge of the clearing was a figure, tall, too tall, at least 7 feet, maybe more. It stood with its back slightly hunched, arms hanging at strange angles. It was facing the cabin, facing me. I could not see details, just the outline, but something about the way it stood made my skin crawl. Then it moved. Not walked. Moved. Its legs bent wrong, like the knees were backward, and it kind of glided forward a few steps. The moonlight hit its face, and I saw 2 small points of light where its eyes should be, reflective like an animal's. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The figure moved again, sliding to the right, disappearing from view. I heard the footsteps move to the back of the cabin. I scrambled across the room to the back window and peeked out. There it was again, passing by the back door. It stopped, turned its head toward the door, tilted it like it was listening. For 10 seconds it just stood there. Then it turned and walked into the trees. I watched until I could not see it anymore. I did not move from that spot for another hour. When I finally stood up, my legs were shaking so bad I almost fell. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I just sat on the bed, staring at the door, waiting for morning. As soon as the sun came up, I forced myself to go outside. I needed to see if I had imagined it. I grabbed a flashlight even though it was daylight and stepped onto the back porch. My stomach dropped. There on the living room window were handprints. Big ones, but wrong. The fingers were too long, too thin. Each one had to be at least 2 inches longer than a normal human finger, and the joints were pronounced, like the bones were pressing against the skin. I counted 5 fingers, but they looked skeletal. I backed away from the window and started walking around the cabin. Footprints. Everywhere. Large, bare feet with long, pointed toes. They circled the entire cabin from the front yard to the left side, all the way around the back, then to the right and off into the woods. I counted at least 20 prints. I thought about calling the police, but I had no cell signal. I had known that before I came, but now it felt like a trap. I thought about leaving, getting in my truck and driving down the mountain right then. But the truck was parked 50 yards away, down a short trail through the trees. And that thing, whatever it was, had walked into those same woods. If it was still out there, it could be between me and the truck. I made a decision. I would stay until tomorrow morning. Leave at first light when I could see everything clearly. I went back inside, locked every door and window, and shoved a chair under the front door handle. I found the biggest kitchen knife I could and kept it on the nightstand. I tried to work, but it was useless. I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for the sun to go down. Night came faster than I wanted. I left the living room light on this time. I was not going to sit in the dark. I lay on the bed fully clothed, knife next to me, and waited. At 11 it started. The footsteps came back. Thump, 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 slow and heavy on the front porch. Then they moved to the side of the cabin. The tapping started, tock, 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 harder than before, multiple windows, living room, kitchen, bedroom. It was checking every window. Then came the scratching. A long, dragging sound down the glass. Skrrrrrrrt. My whole body went rigid, and then I heard the voice. At first it was just a low muttering like someone talking to themselves. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. The voice was deep, raspy, like gravel scraping together. It did not sound human. It sounded like something trying to imitate a human voice. The words were slow and broken. Inside, let inside. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, eyes locked on the bedroom door. The voice continued, moving around the cabin as the footsteps moved. I see you, I see you. It repeated those phrases over and over, sometimes mumbling, sometimes almost clear. It knew I was in there. For 2 hours it circled the cabin, tapping, scratching, talking. Then at 1 in the morning it stopped, total silence. I did not move, did not even sit up. I stayed frozen until 3, and only then did I let myself relax enough to sit up. I did not look out the window, I could not. When the sun finally came up Monday morning, I knew I had to see what it left behind. I opened the front door and my legs nearly gave out. Handprints everywhere. Every single window had them. Long skeletal fingers pressed against the glass. The front door had handprints too, layered on top of each other like it had been feeling the door, testing it. I walked around the cabin. Footprints covered the yard. They were not random. They followed a pattern, circling, packing. But the worst part was at the front door. I looked down at the handle. There were scratch marks around it, deep gouges in the wood. It had tried to open the door. It had tried to get in. I remembered the voice. Let inside. It had been trying to get in all night. If that door had not been locked, if I had forgotten even once, it would have been inside with me. I did not think. I ran into the cabin, grabbed my backpack, and shoved my wallet, keys, and phone inside. I left everything else. The laptop, my clothes, the project. None of it mattered. I had to leave. Now, it was 6:30 in the morning. I stepped outside and looked around. The woods were quiet, too quiet. No birds. No wind, just stillness. But I felt it, the heavy, suffocating feeling of being watched. I started running, 50 yards through the clearing, then down the narrow trail to where my truck was parked. My feet pounded the dirt and I did not look back. I reached the truck, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped them. I got the door open, threw myself inside, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I have never been so grateful to hear that sound. I threw it into drive and hit the gas. The dirt road was rough, and the truck bounced hard over every rut and rock. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. About 200 yards down the trail, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My heart stopped. There was something standing in the middle of the road behind me, the figure, tall, hunched, motionless, just standing there, watching. I slammed the gas pedal harder and the truck lurched forward, bouncing violently. I looked in the mirror again. It was still there, not moving, not chasing, just standing. After a sharp curve, I lost sight of it. I kept driving, did not slow down until I hit the paved road 15 minutes later. I pulled over, shaking, gasping for air. I looked back toward the mountains, just trees, green and thick and endless. I sat there for 10 minutes trying to process what had just happened. I could not. It did not make sense, but I knew one thing for sure: it was real. I drove back to the city and never went back. I did not finish the project on time. I did not care. Later, I looked up Appalachian creature sightings online. There were dozens of reports, tall figures, long fingers, voices in the night. I do not know what it was, but I know I was lucky. Now I only work in coffee shops. Crowded ones, where there are always people around. I will never spend another night alone in the woods, not ever again.